The scanner screamed before I even saw her. I was 3 stations down at Saltgate, swabbing a Wren family fresh off the transit line, when the alarm cut through the processing hall like a dropped tray. Red light. Full stop. Every intake officer's hand went to a sidearm out of pure reflex, and the queue behind the gate buckled backward into itself, 40 people trying to become invisible at once. I got there before Holt did, which I shouldn't have. She was small even by Ilkesh standards, gray-blue skin gone ashy at the joints, knees folded under her on the scanner plate where she dropped. Her eyes were too big for her face the way all their children's are, and right now they were half shut, fixed on nothing. No guardian in the line behind her, no tag on her wrist. Just a girl who'd walked through a war zone to reach a checkpoint and then run out of whatever had been holding her up. Contaminant profile positive, Holt said, reading his slate like it was scripture. Containment officer, 3rd rotation, the kind of man who'd memorized the directive numbers instead of what they were for. Directive 12, removal for containment processing. Removal for containment processing meant the shuttle pad behind the east wall, and what waited past that wasn't processing. I'd seen the manifest once by accident 8 months back. I'd never asked to see it again. She's dehydrated, I said. Maybe 2 days without food. That throws every marker you've got. The scanner doesn't care what throws it. It reads positive, it goes. Then run it again with a clean baseline before you put a child on that shuttle. He looked at his slate the way men like Holt look at anything that isn't an order, like it was an obstacle with my face on it. But I was wearing the medical insignia, and he was 3 weeks into a posting he didn't understand yet, and somewhere under the directive numbers was a rule he liked better. Nobody wants to be the one who skipped the retest if it goes wrong on paper. He gave me 20 minutes. Then the shuttle left, with her on it or without her. I carried her to the med bay myself. She didn't fight me, which worried me more than if she had. Up close her breathing had a thin rattle in it, dust dry, and her hands when I checked her pulse were cold despite the heat baking through the station's outer wall. Saltgate sat on a flat the color of bone, and the only weather it had was wind and worse wind. A storm front was already smudging the horizon orange, which meant the shuttle pad's second window, the one that usually bought me an extra hour of slack, wasn't going to exist today. I started the line, got fluids into her, and watched the readout climb instead of fight me, which told me everything Holt's scanner hadn't bothered to ask. Severe dehydration. Starvation markers consistent with 2, maybe 3 days without real food. Nothing in her blood that belonged to any contaminant on the registry. The scanner at the gate didn't know the difference between a sick body and a starved one. It had been calibrated for soldiers coming off a battlefield, not children coming off a road. She watched me work with the flat, waiting stillness I'd seen in a dozen kids passing through that gate, not trust, just the exhausted absence of any other option. I didn't try to talk her into liking me. I just kept my hands slow and told her what I was doing before I did it, the way you'd talk to anyone whose language you didn't speak and whose fear you understood anyway. 12 minutes in, the second alarm went off at the gate. A boy this time, older, traveling with an aunt who was screaming his name through the barrier in a language the translation patch only half caught. Same profile. Same red light. Holt's voice came over the comm flat and fast. 2 positives in 1 cycle meant an outbreak by his protocol, not 2 scared, hungry children who'd walked the same road. You've got a calibration problem, I told him, not an outbreak. I've got a directive and a closing window. Bring her to the pad in 8 minutes or I send security to do it. I didn't have 8 minutes of proof. I had a readout that said what I already knew and a scanner at the gate that didn't care. What I had was a med bay rehydration kit with a busted secondary line, because Saltgate got its supply runs whenever someone remembered it existed, and a girl whose numbers were improving too slowly to argue with anyone in a hurry. I cracked the kit open, found the cracked seal, and swapped it for parts off an oxygen rig nobody had used since the last storm season. My hands knew the work even when my head was running numbers on the 8 minutes. 6 left. 5. A shuttle engine spun up somewhere past the east wall. A low building whine that meant Holt wasn't bluffing about the window. 2 seconds later, boots hit the med bay corridor. Holt hadn't waited out his own deadline. He sent a pair of station security ahead of himself, the kind of men who follow an order because arguing with it costs more than carrying it out. I put myself between the cot and the door and didn't move, and for one long breath nobody in that room knew whether I was about to be arrested for it. I told them the readout was logged, the retest was pending under a senior officer's authority, and that anyone who touched her before that authority arrived would be the one explaining it on record, not me. It wasn't entirely true yet. It was true enough that they hesitated, and hesitation was all the time I needed. Inspector Vance came through the med bay door at 4 minutes, which I hadn't planned on and which changed everything, because Vance outranked Holt by 2 grades and had the actual authority to override a field directive. And Vance had landed early because of the storm, not because anyone had called for oversight. "Officer Holt tells me you're delaying a containment removal," Vance said. "No heat in it. Just a question with an answer already half-formed behind it." "I'm correcting a misread," I said. "Run her through the gate scanner again, side by side with mine, right now, with a hydration baseline logged before you start. If the gate reads positive against a documented clean baseline, I'll carry her to that shuttle myself." It wasn't a request. I made sure of that. Vance looked at the girl, who'd opened her eyes enough to track the new voice, and looked at my readout, and made the decision people like Vance are paid to make when somebody finally gives them a clean choice instead of a panicked one. We ran it together at the gate, my baseline logged and locked, Holt standing close enough that I could hear him breathing wrong. The scanner read her again. Negative. Not borderline. Not contested. The machine that had condemned her 20 minutes earlier looked at a body with water and food back in it and found nothing wrong at all, because there had never been anything wrong, only a directive that mistook hunger for plague and a man in a hurry to be right. Vance didn't raise his voice either. He just told Holt, in the flat tone of someone closing a file, that Directive 12 required a hydration baseline before any positive read, effective that hour, station-wide. Holt didn't argue. Men like him rarely do once the cost of being wrong has a face attached to it. The shuttle left without her. I watched it go from the gate, the storm front swallowing it within a minute of liftoff, and felt something in my chest unclench that I hadn't let myself name as fear until it was over. The boy from the second alarm got the same retest an hour later, under the same new rule, and came back negative too. His aunt was still standing at the barrier when they brought him through, and she didn't say a word to anyone, just folded around him like the wind outside had been trying to take him the whole time and had finally given up. She stayed 3 more days while the storm sat on the flat and her numbers climbed where they belonged. On the second day she said a word I didn't recognize, soft, almost private, and pointed at the cup of water in my hand. I gave it to her and she drank, and that was the whole conversation. It was enough. When the relief convoy finally cut through the storm wall and her people came to claim her, she didn't run to them right away. She came to me first, put one cold hand flat against my wrist where she'd felt my pulse 100 times in 3 days, and held it there a moment before she let go. I never got her name from the manifest. I never needed it. I just remember that for 20 minutes the only thing standing between a hungry child and a registry's bad math was somebody willing to run the test again, and that some days that's the whole job.